The shuttle was small. It was old, and compared to the massive warships and golden cruisers docked around Concord Station, it looked like a toy floating in an ocean of giants. Sam Bishop stood near the front window and stared at the station. It was bigger than anything he had ever seen. The structure stretched across the darkness of space like a city built inside a ring, spinning slowly, covered in lights of every color. Thousands of ships moved around it like insects around a hive. This was the center of the galaxy's power, the place where over 400 species made their laws, settled their disputes, and decided who mattered and who did not. Today, Earth was going to ask if it mattered. Sam turned away from the window and looked at the two people sitting behind him. Katie Voss sat with a tablet on her lap, reading through alien legal codes for what had to be the 100th time. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and dark hair tied back in a tight knot. She had spent the last 3 years learning everything she could about the Galactic Concord, its rules, its history, its weaknesses. She was the smartest person Sam had ever met, and she never let anyone forget it. Beside her sat Nate Lawson. He was the opposite of Katie in almost every way, big, quiet, still. He sat with his arms folded across his chest and his eyes half closed. But Sam knew better than to think he was resting. Nate was watching. He was always watching. Before this mission, he had spent 20 years in military intelligence, and old habits never died. "You ready?" Sam asked. Katie looked up. "I've memorized their entire charter. I know the names of every council member, their species, their political leanings, and their voting records for the last 60 years. So yes, I'm ready." Sam looked at Nate. Nate opened one eye and gave a small nod. That was enough. The shuttle docked with a soft clang. The airlock hissed open, and the three of them stepped into Concord Station for the first time. The air inside was warm and smelled faintly sweet, like flowers mixed with something metallic. The corridors were wide and tall, built to fit species of all sizes. Small creatures with too many legs scurried along the walls. Tall, thin beings with skin like polished stone walked in slow, careful steps. A group of floating orbs drifted past, humming softly. Sam had no idea if they were alive or machines. A Velori escort was waiting for them. The Velori were insectoid, tall, with segmented bodies covered in dark green armor-like plates. They had 4 arms and large, multifaceted eyes that reflected light like shattered glass. This one clicked its mandibles twice, which Katie's translator device turned into a flat, emotionless voice. "You are the Earth delegation. Follow." It did not say welcome. It did not say please. They followed the escort through a series of corridors and into the Grand Assembly, the main chamber of the Concord. Sam had seen pictures, but nothing had prepared him for the real thing. The room was enormous. Hundreds of platforms floated at different heights, each one holding a delegation from a different world. Light poured in from a transparent ceiling that showed the stars above. The sound of alien voices filled the air like a living thing. Clicks, hums, growls, whistles, and languages Sam could not begin to understand. Their platform was at the very bottom, the lowest point in the room. Sam understood the message immediately. They were being placed beneath everyone else. He stepped onto the platform without hesitation. Katie and Nate followed. The chamber slowly grew quiet as the delegates noticed the newcomers. A Velori at the highest platform, the High Chancellor, spoke first. Its voice boomed through the chamber, amplified by the station's systems. "The delegation from the planet called Earth has requested formal membership in the Galactic Concord. They may now present their case." Sam stepped forward. He wore a simple dark suit. No medals, no decorations. He looked up at the hundreds of alien faces staring down at him, and took a steady breath. "Thank you, High Chancellor," he said. His voice was calm and clear. "My name is Sam Bishop. I represent the people of Earth, 8 billion souls who have looked up at the stars for as long as our species has existed. We came here not as conquerors or beggars, but as equals. We have recently developed faster than light travel, and we wish to join the community of spacefaring civilizations. We bring with us a spirit of cooperation, a desire to learn, and a willingness to contribute to the peace and progress of this galaxy." He paused. The silence lasted about 3 seconds. Then the laughter began. It started from the Drath Combine delegation, a cluster of massive reptilian creatures with thick scaled hides and deep-set yellow eyes. Their laughter sounded like rocks grinding together. It spread quickly. The Valori made a rapid clicking sound that their translators rendered as amusement. A species Sam did not recognize made a high-pitched whistling noise. Even the floating orbs pulsed with light in what appeared to be their version of a joke. The entire chamber was laughing at them. Sam did not move. His face did not change. Behind him, Katie's grip tightened on her tablet until her knuckles turned white. Nate's expression remained perfectly blank, but his eyes moved slowly across the room, studying every platform, every exit, every armed guard. A Drath delegate leaned forward from its platform. It was enormous, easily 3 meters tall, with a mouthful of jagged teeth. When it spoke, its translator gave it a deep, rumbling voice. "This creature stands before us in animal skin clothing and speaks of equality. Its species discovered fire a few thousand years ago, and thinks it deserves a seat among civilizations that have ruled the stars for millennia. Tell me, human, does your little planet even have a unified government yet? Or do you still fight among yourselves over patches of dirt?" More laughter. Another delegate, a Tessari, a being that looked like a tall column of blue-green water, held in a vaguely humanoid shape, spoke with a bubbling voice. "Their slipstream drive is based on principles we abandoned 10,000 years ago. Giving them membership would be like giving a child a seat at a table of scholars." Sam waited. He let every word land. He let every laugh echo through the chamber and fade. Then he spoke again. "I hear your concerns, and I understand that Earth is young among the stars, but every species here was young once. Every civilization in this room had a beginning. We are not asking for charity. We are asking for a chance." The High Chancellor raised one of its 4 arms. The chamber quieted. "The Concord has heard the request. A vote will now be taken." The vote was fast. It was unanimous. Earth's request for membership was denied. But the Concord did not stop there. The High Chancellor announced that due to Earth's technological immaturity and potential instability, the Council would impose the restriction amendments, 12 treaties that would limit humanity to its own solar system. No colonization, no independent trade, no military expansion beyond a small defensive force. The amendments were presented as protection, a kindness offered to a young species that did not know any better. Sam was given no chance to argue. The treaties were passed by voice vote in less than a minute. He accepted them. He thanked the Council for its time. He turned and walked back to the shuttle, with Katie and Nate beside him. Nobody in the chamber gave them a second look. Earth was a joke, small, weak, and safely caged. The galaxy had already forgotten about them by the time the shuttle undocked. Inside the shuttle, Sam sat down heavily. He loosened his tie and stared at the floor for a long moment. Katie was already pulling up data on her tablet, her jaw tight with anger. Nate stood by the window, watching Concord Station shrink behind them. "Katie," Sam said quietly, "I want a full analysis of every species that laughed. Their military strength, their trade dependencies, their political alliances, and every crack in their armor." Katie nodded. "Already started." Sam looked at Nate. "And I want to know every weakness in that station, every blind spot, every system that can be broken." Nate turned from the window. For the first time that day, he smiled. It was not a warm smile. "Already done," he said. Sam leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. "Start the clock," he said. "We have work to do." The shuttle carried them home through the silence of space. Behind them, the galaxy continued to spin, vast and ancient and sure of itself. It had no idea what it had just started. 5 years passed, and Earth was quiet. Every 3 months, Sam Bishop sent a polite report to the Galactic Concord. The reports were short, boring, and full of the kind of language that made diplomats feel comfortable. Earth was following the restriction amendments. Earth was grateful for the Council's guidance. Earth hoped for continued peace and cooperation. The Vylori barely read them. The draft did not read them at all. The galaxy had moved on to bigger concerns: border disputes between old empires, trade negotiations, the usual noise of a universe filled with species who believed they were the most important thing in it. Earth was a footnote, a pet that had been told to sit in the corner, and appeared to be sitting. But Earth was not sitting. Deep in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, hidden inside a hollowed-out rock nearly 2 kilometers wide, Katie Voss ran the most important secret in human history. The project had no official name in any government record. Those who worked there called it Longbow. Katie had handpicked every person on the team. There were over 300 scientists, engineers, and technicians living inside that asteroid, and not one of them had told a single soul on the outside what they were doing. They had volunteered for isolation. They had given up years of their lives, and they had done it gladly, because every single one of them remembered the laughter. The work had started small. In the first year, Katie's team had focused on understanding the alien technology they had managed to collect. Some of it came from wreckage, ships that had crashed or been abandoned near the edges of human space. Some came from the black market, purchased through channels that Nate Lawson had carefully built using intermediaries who could never be traced back to Earth. And some of it came from defectors, aliens from smaller species who had their own reasons for wanting the Concorde to lose its grip on the galaxy. Ryan Tate was the one who made the first breakthrough. He was a tall, thin man with messy brown hair and dark circles under his eyes that never seemed to go away. He had been an aerospace engineer before Longbow, designing cargo shuttles for mining companies. Now he spent his days pulling apart alien shield generators and trying to understand how they worked. The Vylori shields were considered the best in the galaxy. They used a system of rotating energy harmonics that made them nearly impossible to break through with conventional weapons. Every species that had tried had failed. But Ryan noticed something that no alien engineer had ever thought to look for, because no alien engineer had ever needed to. The harmonics had a pattern. It was buried deep inside layers of complexity, hidden behind thousands of frequency shifts per second. But it was there, and once Ryan found it, he could not unsee it. He brought it to Katie at 3 a.m, his hands shaking from too much coffee and not enough sleep. He showed her the data on a cracked tablet screen. She stared at it for a full minute without speaking. "If this is right," she said slowly, "we can tune a weapon to cut through their shields like they aren't even there." "It's right," Ryan said. "I've checked it 40 times. Katie put her hand on his shoulder. "Check it 41 times, then build me a prototype." The second breakthrough came from Megan Cole, a quantum physicist who spoke so softly that people often had to lean in to hear her. Megan had been studying alien faster-than-light drives, not to copy them, but to understand their limits. Every species in the Concorde used some version of the same basic technology. They bent space around their ships and rode the fold like a wave. It was fast, reliable, and well understood. Megan wanted something different. She had a theory that instead of bending space, you could shift a ship's phase, move it slightly out of alignment with normal spacetime, so that it could travel through a kind of parallel layer where the rules of distance did not apply. The math was insane. The energy requirements were enormous. Every physicist she had talked to before Longbow had told her it was impossible. But inside the asteroid, with unlimited resources and no one telling her to stop, Megan made it work. She called it the phase-shift engine. In simulations, it was faster than anything the galaxy had ever seen. A ship using phase-shift could cross a distance in seconds that would take a Concorde vessel hours. And because it operated outside normal space, it was completely invisible to every known sensor system. Ryan built the first working engine in a test chamber deep inside the asteroid. When they fired it up, a small metal sphere vanished from one end of the room and appeared at the other end before anyone could blink. Megan cried. Ryan laughed. Katie made them do it 100 more times before she believed it. While Longbow worked in silence, Nate Lawson built his army. On paper, Earth's military was exactly what the restriction amendments allowed. 40 ships, lightly armed, designed only for defense within the solar system. The Concorde monitored them through long-range sensors and occasional inspections. Everything looked normal. But Nate had spent 2 decades learning how to hide things in plain sight. The real fleet was being built in places no one would think to look. Shipyards carved into asteroids in the Kuiper Belt, so far from the sun that they were invisible to any sensor the Concorde had pointed at Earth. Construction facilities buried beneath the surface of moons that were officially listed as uninhabited. Assembly stations disguised as mining platforms. The ships were built slowly and carefully. Each one was constructed from materials that did not match any known human manufacturing signature, making them impossible to detect through supply chain analysis. Nate recruited crews from every branch of Earth's military, selecting only those who could keep a secret, and who carried the memory of the Council's laughter like a scar. By the end of the 3rd year, he had 100 ships. By the 4th year, 200. By the end of the 5th year, 312 warships sat in the darkness of deep space, fully armed, fully crewed, and waiting. Nate visited Longbow once during the 4th year. He stood in the test chamber and watched Ryan demonstrate the phase-shift engine. He watched a ship model vanish and reappear across the room. He asked only one question. "Can you put this in a warship?" Ryan nodded. "Already working on it." "How soon?" she said. "6 months," she said. "Maybe less." "Make it less," Nate said, and left. Back on Earth, the world had changed in ways that were hard to see from the outside, but impossible to miss from within. The video of the Council's laughter had leaked within weeks of the delegation's return. Someone on the shuttle, no one ever admitted who, had recorded the entire session and uploaded it to every network on the planet. 8 billion people watched aliens laugh at their species. 8 billion people watched their representatives stand still and take it. 8 billion people felt something shift inside them, something old and deep and dangerous. Military enlistment doubled in the 1st year. It tripled by the 3rd. Universities redesigned their programs around xenotechnology and advanced physics. Factories that had once built cars and appliances quietly retooled to produce ship components. Governments that had spent decades arguing with each other suddenly found common ground. The United Earth Government, once a loose and toothless organization, became the most powerful political body in human history, and Sam Bishop became its Secretary General. Sam played his part perfectly. He sent gifts to the Valori, cultural artifacts, music, literature. He praised the Drath in public statements, calling them a great and admirable civilization. He attended virtual diplomatic functions and smiled and nodded and said all the things a defeated, obedient species was supposed to say. Some of the alien delegates began to pity Earth. A few even spoke kindly about humans in private, the way a person might speak kindly about a dog that had learned a new trick. Sam accepted the pity with grace. It was the most useful weapon he had. On the last night of the 5th year, Sam sat alone in his office in Geneva. The city was quiet outside. Snow fell softly against the window. His desk was covered in reports. From Katie, from Nate, from the dozen other people running a dozen other secret programs that the galaxy knew nothing about. His phone buzzed. A message from Katie. Just 2 words. "We're ready." Sam read it twice. He walked to the window and looked up at the sky. The stars were hidden behind clouds, but he knew they were there. He knew that somewhere out in that darkness, 400 species were going about their lives, secure in the belief that the universe belonged to them, and that the small, young, foolish creatures on Earth would never be anything more than a joke. He picked up his phone and typed a reply to Katie. 3 words. "Then we begin." He turned off the light and left the office. The snow kept falling. The world kept turning. And somewhere in the cold silence of the asteroid belt, 312 ships began powering up their engines for the first time. The galaxy was asleep. Not literally, of course. Stars do not sleep. And on 1,000 different worlds, billions of creatures were going about their lives under alien suns. But in the way that mattered, the galaxy was comfortable. It was settled. Nothing important had changed in centuries, and nothing important was expected to change for centuries more. The old powers held their thrones, the old rules held their weight, and Earth, small, quiet, obedient Earth, sat in its corner of space and did as it was told. That was about to end. Sam Bishop sat in a room deep beneath the surface of the moon. The room was cold and gray, filled with screens and communication equipment. Around him sat Katie Voss, Nate Lawson, and a handful of other people whose names would never appear in any history book, but whose work had made this night possible. They had been planning this moment for 5 years. Every detail had been checked, rechecked, and checked again. Every piece was in place. Every person knew their role. Sam looked at the clock on the wall. It read 23:47 Universal Standard Time. 13 minutes until midnight. "Status report," he said. Katie spoke first. "Signal jammers are positioned on 37 Concorde relay stations across 3 sectors. My teams planted them over the last 22 months, disguised as routine maintenance drones. On my command, they will activate simultaneously and cut alien communications for approximately 6 hours. After that, the Concorde's technicians will find and remove them, but by then, it won't matter." Nate went next. "All 312 ships are powered and in position. Fleet groups are holding at rally points near Earth, Mars, and the Jovian colonies. Phase shift engines are online and tested. Weapon systems are armed. Crews are at battle stations." He paused. "The Defiance is standing by for its jump." Sam nodded. The EFS Defiance was their flagship, the largest and most powerful ship humanity had ever built. It was commanded by Captain Chris Dunn, a man Sam had chosen personally for reasons that went beyond his military record. More importantly, Chris understood what this night meant. He would not flinch, and he would not fire unless fired upon. What they were about to do required precision, not violence. At least, not yet. "And the ground teams?" Sam asked. Katie pulled up a list on her screen. 42 operatives embedded in neutral trade stations along the border. Each one is carrying a physical copy of the withdrawal declaration, printed on paper, signed and sealed. They'll deliver them by hand to every major species ambassador the moment we go live. Sam almost smiled at that. Paper. In a galaxy that communicated through quantum relays and light-speed data streams, humanity was going to deliver its most important message on paper. It was deliberate. It was meant to say something, that this was not a tantrum or a glitch in their systems. This was planned. This was chosen. This was personal. The clock read 23:52. "Let's go over the message one more time," Sam said. Katie handed him a tablet. He read the words slowly, even though he had written them himself, and knew every syllable by heart. "To the Galactic Concorde. Earth formally withdraws from all 12 restriction amendments, effective immediately. We do not request your permission. We do not seek your approval. Every treaty you imposed on humanity is hereby declared void. You caged a species that asked only for respect. That was your mistake." He set the tablet down. The room was silent. Everyone was looking at him. "Any second thoughts?" he asked. Nobody spoke. "Good." Sam looked at the clock. 23:56. "Katie, prepare the jammers. Nate, give the fleet the standby signal, and get me a channel to Chris." The next 4 minutes felt like hours. Sam could hear his own heartbeat. He thought about the day he had stood in the Grand Assembly and listened to 400 species laugh at his planet. He thought about the Drath delegate who had called humanity animals. He thought about the Veilori High Chancellor who had imposed the restriction amendments without even allowing a debate. He thought about every quiet, careful, patient day of the last 5 years. Every lie he had told, every smile he had faked, every gift he had sent to creatures who saw his species as nothing. He thought about 8 billion people on a small blue planet who had looked up at the stars and been told they did not belong there. The clock hit midnight. "Now," Sam said. Katie pressed a button. Across 3 sectors of space, 37 devices hidden on Concorde relay stations activated at the same instant. The effect was immediate. Communication channels that had carried data between species for thousands of years went dark. Signals vanished. Screens went blank. In military command centers, on diplomatic stations, and aboard warships across the galaxy, operators stared at their equipment in confusion. Nothing like this had ever happened before. In the same moment, Nate spoke a single word into his communicator. Go. 312 warships emerged from the darkness. They rose from asteroid fields, slipped out from the hind moons, and powered up from positions in the cold emptiness of the Kuiper Belt. They moved into formation around Earth, Mars, and the Jovian colonies in patterns that Nate had designed over years of careful planning. Each ship took its assigned position with perfect precision. Within minutes, a defensive perimeter surrounded all of human space, a wall of metal and fire that had not existed an hour ago. Across the border, in neutral trade stations scattered along the edge of Concord space, 42 human operatives walked into ambassador offices, diplomatic lounges, and council meeting rooms. They were dressed in civilian clothes. They carried no weapons. Each one held a sealed envelope. They handed the envelopes to the alien ambassadors without a word. Some of the ambassadors opened them immediately. Others stared at the paper in confusion. Many species had never seen physical documents before. Inside each envelope was the same message Sam had written, printed in the ambassador's native language alongside standard galactic common. And then came the moment that the galaxy would never forget. Captain Chris Dunn stood on the bridge of the EFS Defiance. The ship was enormous, a kilometer long, built with every piece of technology that Longbow had created and Nate's shipyards had perfected. Its hull was dark gray, angular, and covered in sensor arrays and weapon ports that no alien had ever seen before. It carried a crew of 400 and a phase-shift engine that could fold space like a sheet of paper. Chris looked at his crew. They were young. Most of them had grown up watching the video of the Council's laughter. They had enlisted because of it. They had trained for years for this exact moment. "All stations report ready, Captain," his first officer said. Chris nodded. "Engage phase-shift drive. Take us to Concord Station." The Defiance vanished. There was no flash of light, no streak of energy, no trail to follow. One moment it was there. The next moment it was not. It simply ceased to exist in one place and began to exist in another. It reappeared in the space directly above Concord Station. Every alarm on the station screamed at once. Sensor operators across a dozen species scrambled to understand what had just appeared on their screens. A ship, a human ship, was sitting in the most heavily guarded region of the galaxy, and no one had seen it coming. No one had detected its approach. It was simply there, as if it had always been there. The Defiance did not fire. It did not move. It hung in the darkness like a monument, its engines glowing with a faint blue light that no alien recognized. It held its position with absolute stillness, and that stillness was more terrifying than any weapon could have been. The Valori High Chancellor sent a message on every available frequency. "Human vessel, you are in violation of Concord's sovereign space. Explain your presence immediately, or you will be fired upon." His face appeared on screens across the station. A calm, ordinary human face looking back at some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. "Ambassador Bishop already explained," Chris said. His voice was steady and quiet. "We suggest you read his message again." He closed the channel. Across the Concord, panic spread like fire. Delegates rushed to their communication systems and found them dead. Military commanders tried to contact their fleets and heard only silence. Ambassadors on neutral stations stared at paper letters they could not believe were real. In the room beneath the moon, Sam Bishop watched the data streams pour in. Everything was working. Every piece of the plan was falling into place, exactly as they had designed it. Katie sat beside him, monitoring the jamming network. "Communications will be down for another 5 hours," she said. "After that, they'll start getting organized." 5 hours is enough," Sam said. Nate looked up from his tactical display. "The fleet is in position. No hostile movements detected. The Drath are scrambling, but they can't coordinate without their relay network. Sam leaned back in his chair. He felt the weight of 5 years lift from his shoulders, not all of it, but enough to breathe. Now we wait, he said, and when they come to talk, we'll be ready. Above Concord Station, the Defiance held its position in silence. The stars burned behind it, cold and ancient and indifferent. The galaxy had woken up, and for the first time in a very long time, it was afraid. The communication blackout lasted exactly 5 hours and 43 minutes. When the Concorde's technicians finally located and disabled the last of the human jamming devices, the galaxy that came back online was not the same galaxy that had gone dark. In those 6 hours, everything had changed. The Valori High Chancellor called an emergency session of the full Concorde within minutes of restored communications. The Grand Assembly filled faster than it ever had in its history. Delegates from hundreds of species crowded onto their platforms, shouting, arguing, and demanding answers. The chamber that had laughed at humanity 5 years ago now sounded like a storm. At the center of it all was the empty platform at the bottom of the room, the one where Sam Bishop had once stood. It was still there, still the lowest point in the chamber. But now it felt less like a symbol of Earth's weakness and more like a hole in the floor, a gap where something dangerous had once been contained and was now free. The High Chancellor called for order. It took several minutes for the noise to die down. When it finally did, the Chancellor spoke in a voice that tried to sound commanding, but carried a thin edge of something it had never carried before. Fear. The human species has violated the restriction amendments. They have built an unauthorized military fleet. They have deployed weapons of unknown design. They have placed a warship above this station. This is an act of open defiance against the authority of the Galactic Concorde. The draft delegate, the same one who had called humans vermin 5 years ago, rose from its platform. Its massive body cast a shadow across the chamber. This is not defiance, it growled. This is an act of war, and the response must be war. Send a fleet, destroy their ships, push them back into their little solar system, and seal the door behind them. A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber, but it was not as loud as it should have been. Not as confident, because every delegate in that room had read the reports that had come in during the blackout, and those reports told a story that none of them wanted to believe. The human fleet was real. 312 ships, each one equipped with technology that Concorde intelligence could not identify. The flagship, the one sitting above their station at that very moment, had appeared without any warning on any sensor system, and the humans were not running. They were not hiding. They were sitting in the open, engines cold, weapons visible, daring the galaxy to make a move. The Tessari delegate spoke next, its watery form rippling with agitation. We must be careful. We do not understand their technology. Launching an attack against an unknown force is not strength. It is foolishness. The Tessari are always careful, the draft delegate sneered. That is why you rule nothing. The argument went back and forth for hours. In the end, the draft combine got what it wanted, permission to send a probe fleet to test Earth's defenses. 60 warships, drawn from the draft's border garrisons, would approach the human perimeter near Mars and assess the situation. The Concorde called it a reconnaissance mission. Everyone knew it was a threat. The draft fleet launched within a day. 60 ships in tight formation, their hulls dark and heavy with weapons, moving through space like a fist. The fleet commander was a veteran of dozens of engagements, a decorated officer who had crushed rebellions and border conflicts for the Combine his entire career. He had never lost. Nate Lawson watched the draft fleet on his tactical display and felt nothing. He had expected this. He had planned for it. He turned to his communications officer. Get me Commander Briggs. Laura Briggs was aboard the EFS Steadfast, a mid-sized cruiser positioned in the outer Martian defense ring. She was 36 years old, with short auburn hair, and a voice that sounded calm, even when everything around her was falling apart. She had trained under Nate for 3 years, running simulations against every alien fleet configuration that human intelligence had ever recorded. She knew the Drath tactics better than most Drath did. Commander, Nate said, 60 Drath warships are inbound to your sector. You have authorization to engage with a force of 15. Laura did not hesitate. 15 is more than enough. She assembled her task force and moved to intercept. Her ships slipped out of the defensive perimeter and into open space, forming a loose spread-out pattern that looked almost careless. The Drath fleet detected them and adjusted course to meet them head-on. The Drath commander sent a message, standard protocol, demanding surrender. Laura did not respond. The two forces closed on each other. The Drath fleet tightened its formation, preparing a concentrated barrage designed to overwhelm shields and punch through armor. It was a tactic they had used 1,000 times. It had always worked. The Drath fired first. A wall of energy lanced across the void, powerful enough to crack a small moon. The blasts reached the space where Laura's ships had been. They were no longer there. The 15 human ships phased out simultaneously, vanishing from every sensor the Drath had. For 3 seconds, the Drath fleet saw nothing. Then the human ships phased back in, behind the Drath formation. They fired. The weapons Katie's team had designed did exactly what Ryan Tate had promised they would do. The energy pulses were tuned to the precise harmonic frequency of Drath's shield generators. They did not slam against the shields and try to break through by force. They slipped through, like a key sliding into a lock, and struck the hulls beneath. 2 Drath ships lost power instantly. Their lights went dark, and they drifted. A 3rd ship's weapons array exploded. Before the Drath commander could issue new orders, the human ships phased out again. They reappeared above the formation, then below it, then to the left. Each time they appeared, they fired, short, precise bursts that targeted engines, weapons, and shield generators. They never aimed for crew quarters, they never aimed to kill. But they aimed to cripple, and they did it with a precision that was almost surgical. The engagement lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, 9 Drath warships were drifting without power. The remaining 51 were retreating at full speed, their formation broken, their commander screaming orders into a system that could barely keep up with what had just happened. Laura Briggs and her 15 ships sat in the emptiness they had left behind, undamaged, unscratched, and perfectly still. Laura opened a channel to Nate. Engagement complete. 9 enemy ships disabled, 0 human losses. Nate allowed himself a small nod. Well done, Commander. Return to formation. The news of the battle spread through the galaxy faster than any message. The Drath Combine had not lost a naval engagement in over 1,000 years. They were the galaxy's most feared military power, the iron fist of the Concord. And they had just been humiliated by a species they had laughed at 5 years ago. The Drath Combine began to crack from the inside. Military leaders blamed political leaders. Political leaders blamed intelligence officers. 2 factions emerged almost overnight. The hardliners, who wanted to send a full invasion fleet to destroy Earth once and for all, and the pragmatists, who looked at the numbers and saw a fight they were no longer certain they could win. In the Concord Assembly, the mood shifted. The Valori still demanded unity, but their voice carried less weight now. The Tessari formally declared neutrality, pulling their fleets back to their home systems, and announcing that they would not participate in any military action against Earth. Other species began to do the same. And then the defections started. The Fenari were the first. They were a mammalian species, short-furred, with large dark eyes and quick hands. They were traitors by nature, and had been members of the Concord for centuries, but they had never been treated as equals. The larger species took their goods and set the prices. The Concord's laws favored the powerful, and the Fenari were not powerful. 3 days after the battle, the Fenari ambassador sent a message directly to Earth, requesting bilateral talks. Katie Voss was chosen to lead the meeting. She met the Fenari delegation aboard a small station in neutral space. The Fenari ambassador was a short, nervous creature named something that human vocal cords could not properly pronounce. So Katie called him Fen, and he seemed to like it. "Your species has done something remarkable," Fen said, his whiskers twitching. "You have shown the galaxy that the Concord is not as strong as it pretends to be. Many of us have known this for a long time, but we were afraid to say it." Katie leaned forward. "We didn't break those treaties to start a war. We broke them because they were unjust, and we're not interested in replacing the Concord with a human empire. We want something better." Fen tilted his head. What do you want? A partnership among equals, Katie said. No species above another. No cages. No restrictions based on how old your civilization is, or how big your fleet is. If you're willing to cooperate in good faith, you're welcome at the table. Fen was quiet for a moment. Then he reached across the table, with one small furred hand. Katie took it. I think, Fen said, that we have been waiting for someone to say that for a very long time. Within a week, 7 more species had contacted Earth through back channels. They were all smaller civilizations, races that had been pushed to the margins of the Concord, and told to be grateful for the scraps they received. They had watched Earth's defiance, and they had watched the Drath retreat, and something inside them had shifted. The same thing that had shifted inside humanity 5 years ago. Hope. Dangerous, stubborn, unstoppable hope. Sam Bishop addressed the United Earth Assembly that evening. The chamber was packed. Every seat was filled. Billions more watched on screens across the planet and across the colonies. He stood at the podium and spoke simply. They told us to stay small. They told us to stay quiet. They told us we were not enough. But we are not a species that accepts a cage. Not now, not ever. We didn't destroy those treaties out of anger. We destroyed them because they were wrong. And every species out there that has ever been told it wasn't enough, they're watching us right now. He paused and looked directly into the cameras. Let's show them what comes next. The chamber erupted. Not in laughter, in something far more powerful. 6 months after the night humanity broke every treaty, the galaxy was a different place. Not because the stars had moved, or the borders had redrawn themselves on some great cosmic map, but because something invisible had changed. The balance of fear, of power, of belief in who mattered and who did not. The galactic Concord still existed. Its stations still spun in the same orbit. Its lights still glowed, and its delegates still gathered in the Grand Assembly to argue about things that once seemed important. But the authority was gone. The certainty was gone. The Valori High Chancellor still sat on the highest platform, but fewer species looked up at it with respect. More of them looked at it with suspicion, or worse, with pity. The Drath Combine had split in two. The hardliners, led by old military commanders who could not accept what had happened near Mars, called for total war against Earth. They built ships, they made threats, they gave speeches about the glory of the Combine and the weakness of mammals. But they could not find allies. No one wanted to fight the species that had taken apart 60 warships with 15. The pragmatists, led by younger Drath politicians and trade officials, saw the world more clearly. They sent quiet messages to Earth. Not apologies, the Drath did not apologize, but offers. Trade proposals, technology exchanges, carefully worded suggestions that perhaps the two species had gotten off to a bad start, and that the future did not have to look like the past. Sam Bishop read every message personally. He did not accept the offers, but he did not refuse them either. He filed them away and waited. Patience had carried humanity this far, and he was not about to abandon it now. The Tessari had opened their borders. They were a scientific species at heart, more interested in understanding the universe than controlling it. And the chance to study human phase shift technology was too tempting to resist. Their delegation arrived on Titan, Saturn's largest moon, with 6 ships loaded with research equipment, and a formal request for a joint scientific exchange. Katie Voss met them on the landing platform. The Tessari ambassador was a tall, shimmering column of blue-green water that somehow held a shape, and spoke with a voice like running streams. Katie had read everything ever written about the Tessari, but meeting one in person was still strange and wonderful. We have studied the stars for 12,000 years, the ambassador said, and in all that time, we have never seen anything like your phase shift drive. You have found a door that we did not know existed. Katie smiled. Then let's walk through it together. The research institute she built on Titan became the first cross-species scientific facility in human history. Within weeks, human and Tessari scientists were working side by side in laboratories carved into the moon's icy crust. Megan Cole led the human team, her quiet voice now carrying an authority that came not from volume, but from the fact that she had invented something that had changed the galaxy. Ryan Tate ran the engineering division, turning theoretical ideas into physical machines with the same stubborn energy he had brought to Longbow. The work was hard. The two species thought differently, humans in straight lines and sharp angles, the tesserae in flowing patterns and layered connections. But that was exactly why it worked. They saw things the other missed. They asked questions the other had never considered. Within 3 months, Megan's team had developed a second-generation phase-shift engine that was 30% faster and used half the energy. She published the designs openly, available to anyone in the new alliance. Because that was the other thing that had changed. Earth was no longer alone. Sam Bishop announced the Sol Compact on a quiet Tuesday morning, standing in a simple room with no decorations and no grandeur. He had chosen the setting deliberately. The Concorde loved spectacle, grand chambers, floating platforms, lights and noise designed to impress and intimidate. The Sol Compact would be different. This alliance is built on 3 principles, Sam said. Equal voice for every member, regardless of size or age. Shared knowledge, freely given, and voluntary membership. No one is forced to join, and anyone can leave. The Fenari were the first to sign. Their ambassador, the small, furred creature Tate had nicknamed Fen, pressed his palm against the document, and made a sound that his translator rendered as a long, contented sigh. My people have waited 400 years for someone to treat us as equals, he said. Today, the waiting is over. Within 3 months, 12 species had joined the Sol Compact. They were all smaller civilizations, races that had spent centuries under the Concorde's shadow, following rules they had no voice in making, paying dues they could not afford, and being told to be grateful for the privilege. The Compact offered them something they had never had, a seat at a table where their voice was as loud as anyone else's. Nate Lawson restructured the military. The Shadow Fleet that had won humanity its freedom became the foundation of the Compact Defense Force, a joint military organization with ships and crews from every member species. He promoted Laura Briggs to Admiral and gave her the task of building something that had never existed before, an integrated fleet where humans, Fenari, and a dozen other species served together. Laura threw herself into the work. The challenges were enormous. Different species had different physical needs, different communication styles, different instincts in combat. A Fenari crew member could fit into spaces a human could not reach. A Tessari officer could process sensor data faster than any computer. A species called the Karathi, massive stone-skinned beings who had joined the Compact in its 2nd month, could survive in environments that would kill almost anything else. Laura did not try to make them all the same. She built a fleet that used their differences as strengths. Mixed species crews trained together, learned each other's languages and habits, and slowly, carefully, became something that the galaxy had never seen, a military force built on trust instead of fear. Chris Dunn and the EFS Defiance were given a new mission. The ship that had announced humanity's arrival to the galaxy by appearing above Concorde Station was now pointed outward, toward the unknown. Chris took his crew beyond the borders of Concorde space, into regions that had been mapped by probe but never explored by living beings. He sent back reports every week, new star systems, some barren, some teeming with primitive life, and a precious few, that showed signs of civilizations too young or too isolated to have been contacted by the Concorde. Chris handled each discovery with care. He did not plant flags, he did not claim territory. He observed, he documented, and he made sure that if and when these species looked up at the stars and wondered if anyone was out there, the first face they saw would be a friendly one. Back on Concorde Station, the Valori High Chancellor requested a private meeting with Sam Bishop. It took 2 weeks to arrange. They met in a small neutral room on a trade station halfway between Concorde and human space. No aides, no advisors, just the two of them. The High Chancellor looked older than Sam remembered. Its segmented body moved more slowly, and its multifaceted eyes seemed dimmer. It sat across from Sam, and was silent for a long time. "I have ruled this Concord for 70 years, it said finally. In that time I have seen empires rise and fall. I have brokered peace between species that wanted nothing more than to destroy each other. I have held this galaxy together through crises that would have broken lesser leaders." It paused. "But I did not see you coming." Sam said nothing. "How did you do this?" the Chancellor asked. 5 years ago you were nothing. Your ships were primitive. Your species was unknown. How did you become this?" Sam leaned forward slightly. He thought about Katie, working through the night in a hollowed-out asteroid. He thought about Nate, building an army in the darkness where no one could see. He thought about Megan and Ryan, chasing ideas that everyone said were impossible. He thought about Laura, standing on a bridge with 15 ships against 60, and not flinching. He thought about Chris, holding position above this very station, with nothing but calm in his voice. He thought about 8 billion people who had watched the galaxy laugh at them and decided together that they would never be laughed at again. "That's the thing about humans," Sam said quietly. "You can try to hold us down. You can write your treaties and build your cages and tell us we don't matter." He met the Chancellor's eyes, all of them. "But you should never count us out. We don't forget, and we don't stop." The Chancellor stared at him for a long moment. Then it made a sound, a soft, rhythmic clicking that Sam's translator could not quite render. It might have been respect. It might have been regret. It might have been both. On Earth, the seasons turned. Spring came to the northern hemisphere, and with it came a warm evening, with clear skies. In a small town in the American Midwest, a girl named Lily sat on the roof of her family's house, with a telescope her father had given her for her birthday. She was 10 years old. She had grown up in a world where humanity reached for the stars, and to her, that was simply the way things were. She pointed her telescope at the sky and watched. The stars were bright and steady, scattered across the darkness like spilled sugar. She scanned from one to the next, looking for nothing in particular, just looking because the sky was beautiful, and looking at it made her feel small and big at the same time. Then she saw it, a streak of blue-white light, there and gone in less than a heartbeat. It was not a shooting star. It was too fast, too bright, too purposeful. It moved across the sky like something alive, like something that knew exactly where it was going. It was a compact ship, phasing into faster-than-light travel, heading outward toward the edge of known space, and whatever waited beyond it. Lily did not know this. She did not know about the treaties or the laughter, or the 5 quiet years, or the night when everything changed. She was 10 years old, and all she knew was that something incredible had just crossed her sky. She smiled. Somewhere out there, among the ancient stars, and the newborn alliances, and the vast uncharted darkness, humanity was still moving forward, still reaching, still refusing to stop. The galaxy had tried to tell them they were small. They had answered by becoming something the galaxy had never seen before. Not conquerors, not rulers, something better.